Hello, everyone. Just waiting to have a few more people here before we go live. So we'll take some time. We've got some people who are very excited about David's appearance in the webinar. Good to see that. David, you're feeling loved today. So we'll wait for a few more minutes as people are trickling in. I think in the meantime, we did have a poll to ask people about their role and what their what y'all are what your role is in your company, and just so that we can get to know y'all a little bit more. And feel free to kind of post hello in the chat, or who you are, what company you're from, all of that good stuff. I want this to be pretty interactive. I don't know if y'all have been in our webinars before, but we're quite active on the chat, and we have a lot of people who are active on the chat. So we really encourage that. And if you all have questions, anything like that throughout the webinar, we'll have a bunch of people who are going to be answering questions. I'm only doing the first half, introing people, but then I'll be popping on to answer a bunch of questions as the rest of the team takes it from there. All right, we'll give it another maybe 20, 30 seconds and then start. All right. I think we have quite a few people in the audience now. Thanks everyone for joining us. We are really excited to talk a little bit more today about how you can drive customer efficiencies with the data that you can trust. And we've got some amazing people on the line today. You'll be introduced to them very shortly, but have some really cool stuff. So thank you for joining us, and we're going to hop right in. First off, a quick reminder: please don't distribute these materials to any external parties. It's okay to talk with us, talk about these things to your team, to really talk about it with anyone in your sort of like who you're working with, but please don't send this to outside of your company. Asking questions, please either use the Q&A button or use the chat. We typically get a really good amount of questions, and as I said previously, we'll try to answer as many of those questions as we can, and we'll try to make sure that we are very active in the chats. If you have anything in the meantime, just feel free to send that out. Just to note, we won't be sending the recording out afterwards. We're just gonna have this available, so please take notes. If you want to ask us for the slides, I'm not sure. You can ask Val at Assembled HQ if you're interested in the slides. And then also one final note is the roadmap, as always, subject to change based on your feedback. we really, really like to take in all of your feedback and be very, very responsive to that feedback. Because of that, sometimes priorities end up getting moved around a little bit. This is what we're going to present to you is our best guess at what the roadmap is going to be. We're generally pretty confident that we can launch most of these features, but of course, always trying to caveat this with, not everything works out exactly to plan. All right. Intro to everyone who's talking here today. I'm John. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Assembled. I've been working on Assembled we've been working on Assembled for around 5 years now, and hopefully there's been a lot of really great new innovations that have been coming along. And I will actually pass it to Marc next.
Thanks, John. Marc here, product manager at Assembled. I know I've interacted with a lot of you. Love working with you all. I focus a lot on all things kind of data integrations, as well as metrics and reports here at Assembled. So really excited to talk to you about some of the features that we've launched and some of our new integrations. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to David.
Hi, everyone. I'm David from the customer success team. Super excited to be here. I'll be talking through some customer stories on how customers have used data. And yeah, super excited for this. I will pass it over to Olivia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia Nix, and I lead our core product marketing team at Fivetran. We'll be talking about a new Fivetran connector with Assembled today, so excited to dive into those details and see all the questions that come up.
Cool. Well, actually, I completely misspoke and I got this wrong, but we actually are sending the recording out afterwards, so no need to take notes. That's my bad. We will be sending the recording out. All right, so agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about what our data philosophy is, why data even matters, talk about all of the cool things that we've launched in regards to data, and then, of course, the Fivetran connector launch as well in partnership with Fivetran. And then we'll have Q&A right after that. And again, if you have any questions, please use the chat. So first off, our data philosophy. What is data? Why does data matter? Who cares? First off, a lot of customers that we've talked to, a lot of you all have told us that it's been really, really hard to get good, reliable, trustworthy data. And 98% of the companies that we talk to have some sort of bottleneck in being able to access data and not being able to unlock that data to help them create the efficiencies that you really want in your support team. So what we see a lot is that you can't accurately access data from one system to another, and that there's also kind of like a big bottleneck from turning raw data into actionable metrics that you can actually use. We dug into this a little bit more, and what we found is that there's huge amounts of data silos. All of your data lives in one system for, maybe all of your phone data lives in your phone platform. All of your email data lives in your email platform. And then your other data really can't talk to that. And it's very, very hard to be able to provide overall metrics to yourselves, to your support leaders, to your C-suite without being able to access that. So what we've seen is that these data silos are really limiting and blocking people from being able to optimize their CSAT, improving their customer experience, et cetera. And we've seen this across small and large customers. Some of the biggest customers that we work with, like Cash App, Stripe, they have the exact same problems as we see in some of our smaller customers. And really, it's universal throughout the stack. Even if you have an engineering team devoted to this, it just is still very, very complex. So what does Assembled do, and why does this matter for Assembled? Well, data for us is at the core of really everything that we do. A huge part of what we've been putting a lot of effort in, like for all of 2022 and going into 2023, is creating that foundational set of metrics that are really going to be trustworthy and reliable for you. Data kind of underpins everything that we do, and it's really we're trying to create as good of an integration as possible with each one of your systems. And we think that's actually very different than most workforce management systems out there, where we've talked to people using other workforce management systems where they are really just a interface on top of CSV data that you have exported from another system. We're not trying to do that. We're actually trying to give you deeper, better insights. So what our product here, this is kind of like a visualization of our product. The really big key core part of this is that all of these integrations that we have from the CRM integrations like Salesforce to Zendesk to the phone platform integrations like Five9 and Amazon Connect to the chat integrations like Intercom, all of these are trying to power the same pieces of data that are in our platform. And we want to incorporate that data as best as we can into scheduling, forecasting, how you manage performance, how you have reporting, etc. And it's really all of it. It's all a single piece of the pie. So how do we do these? How have we incorporated data into our platform, and what is our philosophy behind that? There's three big keys to what we're thinking. We want to provide you a single source of truth. That means instead of having to integrate with 20 different things and have to have an engineering team that goes and integrates with your business intelligence system like a Looker or a Tableau, we should be able to pull all that data into Assembled and then give it to you in whatever format you really care about. Single source of truth means trying to create as many really good integrations as possible and being able to provide those integrations and provide data that happens in real time, as opposed to stuff that happens once every 24 hours or once every 48 hours. Really being able to provide that to you quickly. The second part of our strategy is to make sure that data is complete and verifiable. It should be really easily extracted from all of the different systems that we have and imported. So we want to make sure that specifically the way that you are able to look at data and access data is verifiable. We've built a lot of tools actually that show you what the difference, like how you can actually take a look at the metrics, make sure that these metrics are correct, and be able to check and see how we have come up with all of these different pieces of data. Another area that we care a lot about is providing as accurate of data as possible. So our Zendesk app really provides super granular data on agent states, and we want to continue being really good at providing deep data. Finally, we want that data to be really accessible. So we've created all of this work around how do we get really good, trustworthy data into Assembled. Well, most of the time, you all want to take it out of Assembled and use it. And what we're trying to do is provide you with every single means to pull it out of Assembled, whether that's a CSV export or a Fivetran connector, or using our API, or whether you just want to use our own reports, right? That is a really important part of all of this. Is data is only so good as what you use it for, and so we want to be able to make sure that you can use it for all of the great things that are out there. In terms of questions, I think if you have any questions on that philosophy, please put it on the chat. I'm actually going to now hand it over to my illustrious colleague, Mark, and he's going to dive a little bit deeper into what we've launched.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. I am really excited here to talk to you today about everything that we launched over the past few months and the past year, even that helps you kind of like bring all this data into Assemble to make sure that you have that single source of truth that John was talking about. Talk a little bit more about how we can also give you the confidence that we're pulling in the right data and that you understand exactly what that data is, and we can also enrich that data. And as John just mentioned, also very excited to talk to you about all the ways that we are making this data accessible to you, so that we can kind of like break those organizational silos that you might be facing today across your various teams in your organization. So let's first talk about single source of truth and how we pull all this data into Assemble to make sure that you have all the data that you need for your workforce management. Before we talk about specific integrations, though, I do want to talk about our philosophy around integrations. And there's like kind of like three core tenets that we think about when we go after an integration. The first is that we believe in completeness. So if you're going to go and make strategic or operational decisions based on the data that you're seeing in your workforce management platform, we believe that that data has to be complete and accurate. Kind of goes without saying, but that's not always the case, unfortunately. And so that's something that we really strive for. We also recognize that a lot of the platforms that we integrate with are extremely configurable. As a matter of fact, that's probably one of the reasons why a lot of times you've gone with a Zendesk or a Salesforce, for example. It's because you like the way that that was customizable or adjustable to your business. But that also means that your workforce management platform has to be able to adapt to those configurations to make sure that you're looking at the same data in those systems and those platforms as you are in Assembled, so that you have complete alignment across teams. If you don't have that, then chances are you're going to be looking at different metrics or different data in both systems and cause misalignment. Finally, we also believe that the data has to be reliable. And that actually means two things to us. The first is that we have to be providing updates at a quick and reliable cadence, meaning that you're always looking at the latest data from your telephony system or your CRM. But it also means that when you're trying to access that data through a report or you're trying to staff individuals and so on and so forth, that data is retrieved almost instantaneously, and you don't have to wait minutes or even hours to get the data. So three really important core tenets that we focus on with integrations. And to that end, we've really focused on some key integrations with key players in the telephony space and CRM space. And we've gone really deep in these integrations, and we're going to continue going really deep on them according to the tenets I just laid out. That said, I'm actually really excited to talk to you today about two new integrations that we've introduced over the last 3 to 6 months: Talkdesk and Amazon Connect. These are two big players, obviously, in the telephony space. We've heard a lot of asks for this from our customers, and we're actually already seeing a number of customers connect their Talkdesk instances and our Amazon Connect instances to Assembled and pulling that data in and using it for staffing and forecasting. So two very exciting integrations. We can't, so if you're staffing and you're trying to make sure, and staffing and workforce management is all about ensuring that you have the right folks at the right place, the right time, on the right channel, the right queue, and so on and so forth. And I think, as a lot of you know today on this call or this webinar, is that you can't do that if you ignore things like PTO or sick leave, right? So you have to account for that planned time off or even the unplanned time off. And the reality is a lot of that data or a lot of that information actually lives in your HR system. We've always had a number of HR integrations, but we've also introduced 3 new HR integrations with HiBob, Workday, and ADP. There's kind of like various levels of integrations here and sort of like various different functionality that's available in Assembled. But again, we've gone very deep to make sure that there is a seamless integration in all these instances between what you're seeing in your HR system and what you're seeing in Assembled. And this is going to be an area that we continue investing in the future. So we do want to integrate with every single system out there, but there is kind of the reality that that's not always possible, and we recognize that. You may, for example, have a forecast team that is forecasting in spreadsheets, Google Sheets, or some other system. You may be working with a BPO partner, for example, that is coming up with their own schedules from their own system or even a spreadsheet, for example. And you want to be able to pull that data into Assembled, again, to make sure that you're seeing a complete picture from all teams. And when we say taking down silos, organizational silos, that's also a lot of what we mean. It's making sure that those teams are able to also contribute to the workforce management planning process and have their data leveraged by you all. That's why we've had and continue to work on point-and-click CSV uploads to make it extremely simple for you or those teams to upload data, whether it be schedules or templates or forecast directly into Assembled. If you want to automate that, we also have now API endpoints that will allow you to push that data systematically to Assembled. So the same thing, if you want to, for example, push your forecast programmatically to Assembled on a regular cadence, forecast coming from your forecast team, that's extremely easy to do now with our API. Okay, so we've talked about the integrations and we've talked about all the ways to get that data into Assembled. That's awesome. But now how do you make sure that you trust that data? And how can we then also enrich that data to give you even more metrics? We've introduced a new module, our queue configuration module, that was specifically designed to help you understand what ticket data and what case data Assembled is pulling into our platform, and what data and what specifically the raw data we're pulling in from those systems, and how we're using that data to associate those tickets or those cases with certain queues or certain channels. So again, now using this functionality, you're able to actually click into very specific queues and see the tickets that are behind it and exactly why those tickets are showing up where they're showing up. This module was, again, designed specifically to give you the confidence that we are pulling in the right data and it's configured the way you want it configured. Really great way to kind of inspect and go deep and make sure that you have confidence in the volume and the contact the volume and the forecast numbers that are showing up in your workforce management solution. So we've talked about integrations and we've talked about all the ways that we pull existing data from CRM or from telephony into Assembled. But that's actually not all the data that you may want. So now that we have that data and we have your schedules, there's actually some additional data that may be of value to you. And so that's why for Zendesk, we've actually introduced an improvement to our Zendesk application, which allows you to ask agents to track time working outside of Zendesk. So, and this was specifically designed to actually kind of get out of the way of agents and make sure that we're not introducing more work for the agents and we're kind of getting out of their way. So it's designed with automatic ticket tracking as the default. But then if an agent wants, they can go and select a specific event that they might be working on or should be doing outside of Zendesk. So that, for example, if they're going on a break or training or one-on-one, they can pick that event and we're going to be tracking time against that event. Having this data that doesn't exist anywhere else is what allows us to compute things like conformance, solved cases per hour, or even hours spent by specific event type. If you want to see, for example, the number of hours that an agent is spending in training or on break or on wrap-up work and that kind of stuff, you can actually now see this with this new functionality. And another improvement that I'm really excited to talk about is an improvement to how we track time spent on tickets. So now when an agent is working cases or tickets out of Zendesk, we can actually use the browser information as well as ticket status information to infer how much time the agent is truly spending on a ticket. So for example, if your agents are actually going to Zendesk to look at a ticket, but then they have to go to a different browser a different tab in the browser to go to an internal tool, for example, access an internal tool or access something else, some dashboard, for example, to resolve the case, and then come back to that ticket and resolve the ticket. All that time can now, if you want, be counted towards that specific ticket. This is a really great improvement to understand, again, which tickets are taking the most time from all your teams across different agents, because a ticket may be reopened, so you can now track that. But it's also a really great improvement to understand the actual time the agents are spending working on tickets. All right, we've talked about getting data into Assembled. We've talked about verifying that data and enriching it. Now let's talk about how you can actually pull that data out and start playing around with it. So we believe that in 2023, any modern platform should offer an extremely robust API. From the very start of the foundation of the company, we've had an API to allow you to actually pull data out. And this is something that we've continued to invest in and will continue to invest in the future, because we believe this is the best way to actually programmatically pull the data out and push that data to whatever system you store data in or want to manipulate that data in, whether it's a data warehouse or a data warehouse paired with your favorite BI solution. However, we also recognize that you may not always have the technical resources at your disposal to actually leverage an API. APIs can be complicated. And so we offer exports also for all the data you can pull out via the API. It's also available via the export. So I'll just talk about these two a little bit more before I hand it off to David. So for the API, again, as I mentioned, we've always had a very rich API. We've invested in it, quite a bit over the last few months. And we've introduced a few new endpoints and some updates to some of the endpoints. So now you can actually pull out all the agent performance metrics that you have in Assembled that we're pulling in from your CRM or telephony and enriching and pairing with the schedule. So you can now, for example, get information about adherence, conformance, utilization, all very important metrics, obviously, to get a true understanding of how your agents or your teams are performing. You can also pull out agent states if you want. So if you want to know where agents are spending most of their time, whether that's automatic time tracking, so seeing the time spent on a specific ticket, for example, or time spent in one of those manually tracked states that we just talked about if you're using Zendesk, you can also now pull that out using our agent state endpoint. And finally, we've introduced a schedule history audit log, which is a great way to either just for security purposes, for example, understand who's making what changes to your schedule. You may need that again for compliance reasons or security or just kind of like keeping track of what's going on. But you can also use that if you want to build automations, for example, to create triggers or notifications based on certain changes that are happening to your schedules. Really powerful things here, again, to create all sorts of automations outside of Assembled. As I mentioned, if you don't have the technical resources at your disposal, or if you're like me and you want to just pull the data out and start playing around with it in spreadsheets and build your reports there, you can also very easily do that in all of our modules that offer the data via an API. So if you go to any of the modules like team performance, agent scorecard, or staffing, you will now see an export button available, and you'll be able to pull that data out very easily. And with that, now I'm going to hand it over to David, who's going to talk a little bit more about the sorts of things that we actually see our customers do with this data, because you can do more than just what you have with data in Assembled. You can actually now start pairing with additional sources and do some really cool things. David, off to you.
Thank you, Mark. And just as a reminder, everyone, if you have questions, either for me or for anyone else on the panel today, please just do pop them into the questions section of the chat. We will try to answer as many as possible. So as hopefully most of you know, we have like a bunch of in-app reporting and auditing functionality where you can either zoom out across your team or a queue or a time frame, as well as zoom in on specific agents, tickets, etc. I'm going to talk less about the data within Assembled and more talk about what happens when you try to pull data out of Assembled and mix it with other things. And before I dive into some of the stories there, maybe I'll just sort of conjure up what I've heard from customers, maybe having to do with like WFM sometimes, but also sometimes just in their careers as data people. There's this sort of nightmare of trying to get data from one silo to another, and the archetype of this nightmare is when you have like no ability to actually pull out that data. So there you are, like late into the night, manually hard coding, copying data from one source into another. That is like the opposite of what we ever want Assembled to be. And so we, as Mark and John said, try to make it as easy as possible to have access to both any of the reports that we're showing you in Assembled, but also give you like as granular as possible and as easy as possible ways to access that data. The way I think about sort of use cases for the data sides of things is sort of in two buckets. There's first usage analytics, so seeing how your organization is actually interacting with Assembled and getting a deeper understanding of that. And then the second bucket is understanding sort of business performance and impact of your support org on the overall business. So I'll talk a little bit about those too. the first, the example up on the slide is an example from the usage side of things. So as some of you know, we have this functionality for event change requests where we allow agents to submit a request to their manager to rewrite their schedule either historically or in the future. So it might be, I wasn't able to make my shift on time because you, my manager, pulled me into a meeting. I want to make sure that the plan of record actually reflects that. So I'm going to put in an event change request in the past, or it might be forward facing. I'm not going to be able to make that shift because I have a team training that overlaps with it, that sort of thing. And in this instance, we had a large financial technology company that was really interested in seeing how that was broken down across their business, because they have hundreds or maybe even thousands of agents who were engaging with this tool. So the chart that you're seeing here is where they pulled out this usage data from Assembled and just charted it up to see how many of the requests are historical versus future facing. I don't have the examples in this slide, but we actually just had a meeting with them yesterday where we even went a couple layers deeper, and they were interested in seeing how were event change request approvals and denials distributed across all of their different managers. They have like 50 different managers in their organization. And they found that actually one manager was responsible for 16% of overall approvals across the whole org, which was way more than they would have expected for any one manager. And then on the other end of the spectrum, they found another manager had never approved a single event change request, so wasn't using the tool at all. You can also see it distributed by event type request and all sorts of different things, but it's just like one example of how at a large organization, you might be interested in seeing how product adoption and product usage differs across different areas of your organization. And then if we just go to the next slide, I'll talk more about the other bucket, which is measuring performance increase or business impact. The example here is looking at adherence, and what we did here was take assembled data for a point in time, a couple months in the past, and looked across the two channels, chat and email, to measure what was adherence like at the beginning of that point in time, and then also today, what is adherence like in those two channels, to see like how are we progressing against the targets. But the really cool thing here is that this company actually married that data with data from I don't remember if it was the finance team or the HR team, around average wages per agent. And so doing some quick, easy calculations, you can go from additional hours gained via adherence improvement times wage per agent per hour to translate the adherence improvement into a business impact that someone in your leadership team that is maybe further away from what adherence even means can actually understand. You can say, given the changes in the support team that I've been driving as the workforce manager, look at all this money that I've helped save our organization. I've helped help us avoid having to hire X number of additional people because we've been able to drive this amount of cost efficiency. And if you go to the next slide as well, there's another example where it was the same exercise, but a slightly more complex version. So at this company, there were 3 different sites and as well as 3 different channels, and they wanted to measure the same sort of business impact across all of those sites. So it's the same, like looking at before and after adherence improvement, layering on financial data around salaries, and then using that to measure the business impact and the cost savings across the internal support team, as well as the outsourced vendors at 2 different sites. So again, 2 just slightly different examples of how you could do that. And I think it's hopefully this sort of like gets the gears turning for you all of like different ways, regardless of where you are in the organization, that you could use assembled data either in isolation or mixed and matched with data from lots of other sources to create some pretty cool analytics. And with that, I will pass it over to Olivia.
Hey everyone, just a quick brief before I dive into more on Fivetran, but just wanted to sort of pull this all together. I know John at the beginning mentioned issues of data silos and moving that raw data into something that's actually analytics ready. I previously was at Tableau, so very informed and really appreciate the difficulty of actually getting your data into a state where you can find those valuable metrics from it. And I've also been an analyst. So again, really can appreciate how hard this problem is across organizations of different sizes, and it really doesn't necessarily matter sort of the maturity of where you are with your data stack. It's always an ongoing goal to make sure that you can sort of centralize and consolidate and do a better job to bring together different data sources. So anyways, with that, I want to talk a little bit about Fivetran. For those of you that don't know, Fivetran is an automated data movement platform. Essentially, we create connectors that help pull in data from a multitude of different sources, from databases, can be on-prem, in the cloud, our SaaS applications, events, files, cloud data warehouses as well. And we pull all of that data in, and sort of behind the scenes, I'll go into a little bit more. We have normalization taking place. We have a multitude of ways that companies can look at transformations post-load into that destination. So we have close partnerships with many different cloud providers. And so this slide overall is really just a reference architecture. So regardless of different customer use cases, this stays consistent at a high level. So connecting the data source through to the cloud destination. And all of this, the really critical component of value that Fivetran brings is automation. So we're really trying to take the most time-consuming tasks for data engineers off their plates. So we take care of automatic data updates, schema replication, and we even load data into your destination with efficient writes, so our customers save on compute costs. And all of this is done with zero code. We automatically detect for PII and pull out metadata to automatically plug into any data catalog you have. So really looking to be super flexible with the other tools that we know many companies use to sort of manage their data workloads. Next slide. And so here, just diving in a little deeper about what's actually happening in sort of that Fivetran connector piece, bringing that same level of automation to transformation specifically, and wanted to hone in on this because we're really talking about how we can find value from our BI tools and sort of that end goal and working with our actual business counterparts and decision makers who need to be able to take a look at metrics and make decisions based off of that. So our transformations flow is really shaped by the needs of analysts. Once we load into our destination, our customers can automatically trigger synchronized transformations in a multitude of ways. One of them is we are just releasing a quick start data model. So that creates analytic ready tables that are really just connected already to a specific connector. So Facebook, Salesforce already sort of fits in with what we know people are looking to pull from those sources. We also directly integrate with dbt Core, which is a popular transformations product that we see a lot of people using in the market. So no third-party orchestration tools required. Trying to make it easy so that as many different tasks in this flow are able to be done directly within the Fivetran UI itself. And at the end of the day, it's all about getting faster and more reliable reporting. And so this is our sort of all-in-one approach to end-to-end ELT. And then the next slide. Just giving an example, we have over 300 fully managed sources. It means just in a few clicks, you're ingesting data from every major source within your company. For sources that we don't support out of the box, we also have this new by request connector function where you build light connectors, which is actually how we came to partner with Assembled, recognizing that customers are looking for ways to pull data out of Assembled and combine with other sources. And through this new technology, we were able to partner and sort of build that connector relatively quickly. Yeah, I think that's what I've got. And now I believe we've got some Q&A.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Olivia. Yeah, it's funny. For folks who don't know Fivetran, which maybe we should have a poll actually to see like how many people have heard of Fivetran. But such an easy tool to use that without even actually really announcing our new connector, we've already found some customers kind of like going in there and discovering our connector and starting to use it, which is awesome. So that's kind of how simple it is to actually use Fivetran and start pulling data from Assembled without any coding. So we're just going to do a few questions here for Olivia, talk a little bit more about Fivetran, so you all can kind of like understand what Fivetran is and why this connector matters, and then we'll go into a general Q&A. But Olivia, so just for folks who are on the call here, and we have a lot of folks in CX, customer experience, workforce management, if they're thinking about Fivetran, which types of teams would you say generally use Fivetran?
Yeah, we are generally brought in by data engineering teams. A lot of organizations build their own connectors or pipelines in-house, or sort of piecing together maybe native solutions with their cloud provider, or other solutions with that SaaS application. And Fivetran is really a way for them to consolidate and simplify, and actually get valuable time added, since data engineers are extremely valuable, and you want to move them into some other task other than just building and maintaining different pipelines. That said, that's the team that we typically speak directly to, but a lot of times they are coming to us at the behest of the business that is just bringing on more data sources, and asking to bring that into the cloud data warehouse for the organization. And we're finding that data engineers are really just looking for some help of getting that off of their queue.
Got it. So in general, it still is kind of like the data engineering IT folks who are still somewhat technical, but they can leverage this to actually move a lot faster and help the folks here who are on this webinar get to their business goals a little bit faster with less time from those teams.
Yeah, and then I would say there's also in organizations that have a more decentralized way of doing data analytics throughout the company. Mm-hmm. You might give permissions, or someone who is in the marketing org, someone who is in finance, they themselves can also go into Fivetran, set up their connector, make sure that syncs are running, hash different data. So we also see a variety of different users taking advantage of Fivetran, since you don't need to be very technical once you are already a customer.
That makes a lot of sense. So talking a little bit more here about the customer experience CX use case, what are some of Fivetran's more kind of like powerful use cases for CX specifically that you see, or some of the connectors that are more relevant to the folks here today with us?
Yeah, I know some of the connectors that you mentioned earlier that I saw on some of the slides are also connectors that we have that have quite a lot of usage. So our Zendesks, Intercoms, Salesforce, Customer, we really sort of are able to integrate all of these different sources, as well as even proprietary metrics that are sort of all brought into Cloud Data Warehouse. So that's really how we see customer experience and data teams take advantage of Fivetran.
Yeah, fantastic. That also makes a lot of sense. And can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on, like, so if we're pulling this data out of say Zendesk and Assembled and your other kind of like support platforms, what are some of the use cases that you might see these organizations try to like solve for with this data?
So I believe David spoke a little bit to this, but really combining different proprietary productivity metrics that you might have in-house with data from Assembled, from CRM, telephony platforms, and pay data. Some of the analysis that we've seen in terms of what people are trying to achieve as outcomes are calculating how an increase in adherence has led to increased productivity and cost savings. So overall, the need to hire less agents, a cost benefit analysis with HR platforms and payroll data, also increasing the utilization percent leads to cost savings and sort of pulling utilization by agent. And then also pulling SLAs and matching them with over and under staffing to really determine headcount requirements.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot around sort of like being able to blend that data with additional data that might live somewhere else, and try to like run a deep analysis to actually figure out where you can improve efficiency, which I'm sure everyone is thinking about these days.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. So last question for you, and then we'll go into Q&A here. for anyone who's on the call here, who's in the customer experience team, who's hearing us talk about Fivetran right now, may or may not have experience with it, but might be able to talk to someone on a data team. What are some of the things that you think they should look out for? What are some recommendations you might have for them to get this right from the very start?
Well, there's a lot of complexity, I guess, in how you develop your data stack, and even just like a big use case that people come to Fivetran for is when they are sort of shifting into a more of a modern data infrastructure. So one thing, without going heavy on that topic, is just like building in for flexibility and the ability to be agile and change. You know that there are going to be a ton of data sources that you use today, but what are you going to be using in a year from now? There are tons of new services, tons of different types of data that can be pulled in that in all likelihood you'll maybe want to be using for in the future. And so that's where sort of having Fivetran, just giving ourselves that plug of just working with all different types of data sources, working with all different types of destinations, and just being really agnostic of the other vendors that are working within the data sphere.
Absolutely, yeah. Flexibility is key, right? Things are always changing, so it's important to be able to think on your feet and move quickly in this day and age. Olivia, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I think with this, we're actually going to go to general Q&A.
Cool. I had a few questions that got DM'd to me and/or through other areas. Just going to go through this. And please, if you have any other questions, drop them in the chat or drop them in the question and answer part at the bottom right of your screen. First off, what is the next HR integration that will be released soon? This is a hot topic, and I think there's a lot of really good HR integrations that we've been looking at. It's kind of an interesting one too, because it's not entirely in our hands. Actually, ADP is one that we are working on internally, but have in the sake of as much transparency as we can give, it's very difficult to actually obtain an ADP API key. And so we have actually been working for the past few months on getting an API key for ADP. We still don't have an actual timeline on when that might happen, but we are working on it, and it is definitely something that is quite top of mind for us. We just aren't able to give you any sort of timeline. We can't even say whether it's Q1 or Q2 or Q3. It really kind of is. We have to work with their API team, and are trying to figure that out. We've actually heard a lot of other people requesting different integrations. Would love to hear any integrations that are top of mind for you. Other integrations that we are considering but haven't yet made moves on yet. There's we've heard a lot for rippling. We've also it seems like HiBob and Bamboo HR are both really interesting ones. We actually have a HiBob integration, so if y'all wanted to use that for HR, you can definitely do that. UKG UltiPro. So that's a super interesting one, because that actually is one that we are also considering as well. UKG UltiPro is one that we're trying to figure out exactly what the different types of integrations they have are, but we've actually been doing a bunch of work with their team to investigate that. So that one actually might come out sooner than you think, but no promises there yet, as well, because a lot of these integrations do require us to work with the HR platform teams, and so we can't quite give as good of timelines on that, because it includes both our development cycle and working with their team to figure that one out. Sequoia One, I've actually not heard of that, but we will definitely write that one down and take a look. Other questions that people have. One of these. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, there's a question which John, I think either of us could answer here about the sort of next API endpoints that we're thinking about.
Sure. Why don't you answer that, Mark?
Yeah. So first of all, we'd always love to hear from you about new endpoints that you would like to see. So please chime in here in the chat. And as we see here, we're partnering with Fivetran. So if there is an endpoint that you want and we make it available, we also work with Fivetran to make sure that data is available via the Fivetran connector. But the next big one that we're thinking about is being able to retrieve time off information from Assembled, which will be great for, again, like creating automations outside of Assembled, or just kind of like tracking time off requests by agent, by team. John, is there anything that you would add to that one?
No, I think that makes sense. And in general, we're trying to make the API as easy to use as possible, and extensible as possible. All of the data that we have in Assembled, we're trying to mirror that in the API. And actually, one of our internal ideas is every CSV export should also have an API endpoint. And so what we're trying to do is make sure we are mirroring that across both our CSV exports and our APIs, so that you can either get it one-off, or you can use, say, a Fivetran connector or some other connector to pull that into your BI system and your data warehouse. Let's see. Looking through other questions here, we had a question on forecast totals seem great. Also curious what some of the other options are for in-app forecasting models directly in Assembled. That's a great question. Mark or David want to take that? I think both of them have quite a lot of interesting aspects, and I can talk further about the development of what we're doing there.
Yeah, I can take that. So kind of the first approach to forecasting in general with Assembled is obviously going to be using our forecasting models, which we have plenty of. We also are rolling out a seasonal forecast model, which some of you on the call here I know already experimenting with and trying out. So we have different mechanisms to forecast directly in the application. What we are seeing, and the reason that we do have this upload, though, either via the API endpoint or the upload, is actually because we do see a lot of teams that have their own forecasting team, as I mentioned. And so they want to actually leverage our sort of like our patterns that we're coming up with and we're seeing based on the volume, but they want to come up with their own forecast. And so we're actually seeing like that functionality specifically be very popular, especially in like larger teams where you may have an individual or maybe even an entire team dedicated to coming up with forecasts. So when we talk about like breaking silos, to me, it's like one of the best examples of empowering a forecast team that might not have a way today to get that information leveraged when you're staffing into Assembled. But again, if you don't have that team or you just want to kind of like automate it, then there are options directly in the application. All right.
Cool. I think maybe the last area to I actually, yeah, it seems like, well, we should wrap up here as we're getting close to 10:55. I will say we've got a lot of really cool stuff coming up on the roadmap. This was a really awesome webinar. Thanks to everyone for joining us. I know we focused a lot on data, but in the future roadmap, we actually have a lot of things coming up that aren't just on data. Just to share a very high level overview of kind of the next few quarters, we're working on a lot of things involving time off, making time off better. We have a lot of scheduling improvements coming down the door, some automations that I think will hopefully make a lot of your jobs much easier, and also some improvements on permissions, handling things for large teams as well. We'll be talking about that more going down in the future, but hopefully you'll be able to see that coming down the line. And if you have any questions, please email us. We'll send the recording out. And of course, you know, if you have any feedback for us, please let us know. We definitely love to hear that feedback. Thank you so much for coming, and please have a great Wednesday.